Anything said on this show represents opinions only and are not meant to be taken as financial or legal advice. Welcome to Finances the Other F Word, a podcast about the money behind current events where we do the research so you won't have to. Here is your host, Mello, certified financial planner and author of Finances the Other F Word. Catch Mello live on the Station Head app Wednesday mornings at 6 a.m. Pacific Time via the handle @MomentOfMetal. Listener discretion is advised.
So, of course, that was Bring the Noise by Anthrax and Public Enemy, which I will argue pretty vehemently with you that is a better combination of rock and rap than Walk This Way with Aerosmith and Run DMC. So, oh dear God, guys, where do I even begin? Okay, well, let me begin with this, because I was reading this article this morning. We're going to be talking about oil subsidies, and this is the reason why. As a matter of fact, this is a whole series. I'm going to be talking about subsidies that the government pays out to big business. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is because the current administration that's in office is hot and heavy trying to cut government spending. And I'm like, hey, I'm all for cutting government spending all day. So let's really focus on where the money is, because cutting DEI is about $250 million a year, right? So it's nothing to sneeze at specifically, but is that the best place and the most efficient and the most money that you could cut from the budget? No, of course it's not. So in this series, we're looking at oil subsidies. We're going to be looking at farming subsidies. We're going to be looking at military subsidies. It's going to be a adventure. So before we do that, though, I want to read you guys a couple paragraphs from an article I was reading in Bloomberg today. And it's because I keep telling you guys tariffs don't work, right? And I feel like it's so easy for people who think that tariffs are going to fix our economy to argue with me. And I'm not really sure why, but anyway. So I wanted to read just a couple paragraphs from this Bloomberg article. So Fed economists in 2019 calculated that the new import taxes Trump started to impose on aluminum, steel, and select goods from China the year before, so this is 2018, 2019, and select goods from China the year before, and retaliation by other countries resulted in a net loss of U.S. factory jobs and higher produce prices. Okay, so we have a loss of jobs to manufacturing, which is a huge deal because that's a lot of Trump's base. And this is back from 2018 to 2019. Then it goes on to further state, in a later study, economists at the New York Fed and Columbia University found that tariffs caused an $8.2 billion reduction in real income in 2018 and led American consumers and importers to pay $14 billion to the government. Quote, our estimates are likely to be a conservative measure of the losses, they wrote. What happened in 2019 matters because it was the first time policymakers dealt with the economic impact of broad swath of higher import taxes since the 1930s, and it's a rare real world experiment in the effects of protectionism. Now, the reason why we're having this conversation is because we are coming up on the deadline of February 1st. Now, this is where Trump is going to be, or saying he's going to be putting on 25% tariffs blanket from Canada's imports and Mexico's imports and from China's imports, all goods. Now, we've talked about tariffs the first time around in the Trump administration. We talked about tariffs under the Biden administration, and they have been very pick and choosy, right? They don't just say, fuck it, everything that comes in, we're now going to start putting universal tariff on. So even though Trump had said on day one he was going to put on universal tariffs, he has moved the deadline to February 1st. And I would like to see, you know what, I'm not going to say that. So, but the point is, see, this is me, you guys. Woo, reeling in that confirmation bias. So, sticking to the facts, please, Mel. So it could be that as of February 1st, which I think is a Sunday, so technically February 2nd, we could see the rollout of these massive tariffs. And I just read you 3 paragraphs from a Bloomberg article that just came across my screen today, telling you that in 2019, it had a detrimental effect when the tariffs were considerably smaller, because remember, we had the Biden administration in last June, increased tariffs as well. So we have the Trump administration tariffs that stayed intact, and then we had an increase in tariffs that came through the Biden administration, and now Trump is looking at adding on increasing tariffs and universal tariffs for everything that comes through an economy. And I found with my clients who support Trump that they don't want to hear this. And when I explain to them from an economic standpoint how tariffs work, it's like they kind of they can't comprehend it. They can't comprehend it because they think there's this belief that if you disagree with Trump and his policies, that means you hate Trump. And of course, Trump has done a very good way of teeing that up with Trump derangement symptoms and all this kind of stuff. But the bottom line is that I told you on my last show that our money supply is finally to normal levels from all of the bloat that came into the system from the stimulus from COVID. On top of that, now we have a situation where the Fed is meeting, I think today. The expectation is they're not going to move interest rates. We have to see what they're going to do. But with higher tariffs come more penny pinching for us. I don't know if any of you guys have been to the grocery store lately and seen the price of eggs, but the price of eggs, I believe, have doubled since he took office. And so what this means for you and I, this means that if and when a recession does come through, remember for like the last 2.5 years on my show, I kept telling you that the economists keep saying that there's a recession coming, and the recession never materialized. But the expectation was if the recession happened, it would be short and shallow. So just to put what a recession is in context, a recession, I believe the actual definition is a negative GDP for more than 2 quarters. And I'm going to actually, because I don't want to give you guys false information, so I'm going to Google it while we're on here right now, just so I can see if I'm correct, because I don't want to sit there and tell you something that is incorrect. Here we go. In economics, a recession is a business cycle contraction that occurs when there is a period of broad decline in economic activity. So let's see, GDP. And of course, GDP is a measurement of our activity. Let's see, but there is an actual definition. But the point is that you guys get what I'm trying to tell you. So the thing is that while economists were saying quick and short, shallow recession last time, that was taking into consideration us coming off of the extreme interest rate hikes that we've experienced in 2022 and the beginning of 2023. And it was also taking into consideration everybody just trying to get back to find out what their normalcy was of COVID. It was not taking into effect 25% universal tariffs on 3 countries, 2 of them that are that border us. Okay. So when we're talking about recessions, we're talking about all of these things that amplify that. Now let's piggyback that on what happened Monday. So Monday, there was an executive order that was signed. Actually, let me back up. Okay, if you've been listening to my show, you're going to be like, yes, Mel, I know what the fuck you're going to say, and you could probably recite it with me, and I don't care. I'm going to tell you again so you remember. Our budget, 2/3 of our budget, by law, is already appointed. Congress appoints the spending. 2/3 of our budget every single year, every fiscal year, is Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. You guys know what Social Security is. You know what Medicare is. That's basically health care for old people. And then there's Medicaid, which is welfare, okay? Health care for people who are in need or people who cannot work or different situations like that. So I'm in the process of taking a grant writing course. And I'm doing it because my hope is that I can help some little nonprofit who needs to get their hands on some money, and I can actually help give them an avenue so that they can help other people in our society. Well, on Monday, an executive order came down from Trump where he basically said that all federal funds are cut off until they can be evaluated, which closed down all of the Medicare sites, which put Meals on Wheels in jeopardy, which is giving free food to seniors. It also paused free lunches for kids in school. It also affected government grants that had been given out. So we saw it affect veterans. There's this whole thing. And of course, there was an immediate court action that put a stay on it for the time being. Now, Congress is in charge of spending. And remember, I told you, as I've been telling you forever, that 2/3 of that budget is already by law. So this represents an overreach by the president to decide that he is going to just halt all the funds. But that did not stop. This is what bothers me. That did not stop it from happening until there was a court order to make him stop. Now, 9 times out of 10, this is going to get rectified, and the courts are going to say, nope, you can't do it. But eventually, the hope is he's just going to take it all the way up to the Supreme Court. And we've already talked about the ethics on the Supreme Court. I did a whole show on that, talking about Clarence Thomas and everything and all of the other justices that were intermingled with different companies and basically were accepting gifts from them. The difference was the other justices were well, not all of them, but for the most part, compared to Clarence Thomas, were actually reporting it. They were disclosing it to us. Now, you have a president who's given immunity. He shut down the Medicaid websites, all right? And this is also funding for schools. This is a lot of stuff, you guys. And we know that according to Project 2025, like I've told you on my shows before, that part of Project 2025 is that they want to be able to take our public tax dollars that we pay to support public schools, and they want to be able to have that money rerouted to private schools, which typically people who are more affluent, who are well off, are the ones who can send their kids to private school, and they want to be able to have that supplemented. So on top of that, with this order that he signed that is now has a stay on it, he has taken away funding from public schools. So this is very interesting. Yes, it's a travesty of justice for the people who rely on that money. Now, I'm not saying, because you've heard me say on my show before, that we spend too much. We spend too much. 2/3 of our budget is taking care of people. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. Could it be a little less? Perhaps. All right. But taking a sledgehammer to the system and then expecting people who don't have any other means of income coming in to be able to scatter and try to find a replacement source of income is just not, it just doesn't make any fucking sense. Right. And now let's extrapolate that out. You have somebody who is on, welfare. Basically, they're on Medicaid. They're on dialysis, or they have some other difficulty that makes it so they can't work. Okay, they're renting. All right. Now, their support gets cut off. They can't pay rent. So then what you have is a swath of houses. Some of them could be Section 8. All right, which is part of the government. And he wants to kick it back down to the states, and we're gonna talk about that in a minute. You have them, they can't pay their rent. And then what ends up happening is that the people who are renting to them don't have the money to come in. And if they have mortgages on those multi-residential properties, then those mortgages could potentially lapse. All right. If those mortgages potentially lapse, that could put more strain on our banking system. All right. Now, no doubt that they are going to come in and they are going to probably ease up on the regulations of the banking system, which is exactly what got us into 2008, but I digress. Then you have people who are invested in the real estate properties like the REITs, which are struggling, which I told you about so many times, the real estate investment trusts. Those are going to struggle. And then we have this domino effect, because what's going to happen is that if people lose their houses, they are going to have to go to shelters if they don't have family members. Like, once my mother's gone, it's just me, bro, right? I'm not married. I don't have any fucking kids. So the thing is that where are these people going to go? So if they find themselves in a shelter, well, guess who gets federal money for their shelters? I just told you, shelters get federal money. So if you have a hiatus on spending on federal things, then what are these people going to do? Are we going to put them out on the streets with health conditions? And if it is dialysis, because my best friend Jesse, who passed away, was on dialysis, and he worked until he couldn't. He was a workaholic. So the thing is that what happens then? They go on the street, which then also incurs more fees for the city and the people around it, which could then decrease property values, which then just creates this vicious cycle, and away we go. And this is what I tell you guys all the time, is that everything is connected, right? So I don't know what the purpose of putting the freeze on federal things. I don't know if it was for him to try to look like a hero to his supporters, but it doesn't make any sense. And I'm waiting and hoping and wishing and praying that the Republicans at some point get on board and see that it's hurting the constituents in their states. And maybe if that's the case, it'll do it. Now, one of the things, and I'll play another song after this, but one of the things that we hear coming out of the administration a lot is that, well, it's great because it's going to go down to the state. It's going to go down to the state, and the state's going to be able to handle it. This is the argument that they've given for Roe versus Wade. And full disclosure, I'm 100% pro-choice, right? I've told you guys that before, and I don't say that when I disclose things to you guys like I believe in God or that I'm 100% pro-choice. It's not because I'm trying to push my agenda on you. It's just I want you to understand where you're getting your information. So you can evaluate the information I'm giving to you, and you can decide if it feels like something that you believe in or you trust the information. That's why I tell you. But the thing is that pushing this stuff back down to the states are not prepared to do all of this stuff without federal funds, right? Maybe in time they could do that, but what that's going to lead to is higher state tax for those states that have it, or the implementation of state tax for those that don't have it, which is still going to roll downhill. Shit's going to roll downhill, and where is it coming? It's coming to us. It's coming to us, the 99%. And this is why I have such a problem with it. I don't think that Biden was holier than thou or Obama was holier than thou by any means, as far as like that they were the end all be all God, right? And I understand that they're all rich. Everybody in Congress is rich. But the things that he's implementing are consolidating federal funds in an attempt to grasp for power. And the only way it's going to be stopped is if Republicans in Congress start going, hey, you know what, this is really fucking with my people in my state, and I might not get reelected. Let me try to fix the situation. And even though we're talking about oil subsidies today, I wanted to get that out because of the simple fact that it has been a fucking machine gun since this man came back into office, and he has appointed the author of Project 2025 to one of the highest posts in government, where you remember I did a whole show on Project 2025. Trump was on the campaign trail at the time and kept swearing he had nothing to do with Project 2025. He had no idea what it was, and we see this coming directly out of their playbook. Now, if we have a place where you can't give free lunches to kids in school because your federal funds are frozen, then those people have to go to food banks that are also could have federal grants frozen as well. And so if we hit a recession, with universal tariffs of 25% on China, Canada, and Mexico. Okay, plus inflation. Inflation hasn't gone away. Okay, it started decreasing in August. We had a little pop up at the end of the year, and the expectation is the Fed will not raise interest rates or lower them today. We'll see. We'll see what they do. But you take a recession and you put a punch of a 25% universal tariff, and on top of that, you put inflation, and on top of that, you put a strengthening dollar, which is bad for exports. So things that we export out of the country, if our US dollar is stronger, that makes our goods more expensive abroad when we send them out, which means that less people on the global market will buy our goods and services, which means that there will be less need for manufacturing things and making things, right? Which that sector is already being hurt by the tariffs. I just read you at the very top of the hour 3 paragraphs from a Bloomberg article from the time when Trump originally put tariffs on in 2018 and 2019 and the effect it had on manufacturing. And those were little compared to universal tariffs that he's talking about. And of course, there's no concern because he's in the 1%. And so a strengthening dollar means our exports are going to be more expensive, which means people are going to buy less of them, which means that the manufacturing sector is going to be hit by that after already being hit by tariffs and inflation. And if we have a halt on federal funds going out, any of the safety nets that used to be in place to catch these people are now obliterated. Obliterated? Is that a word? Obliterated? Whatever. You know what I'm saying. They're fucking gone, right? You know what I'm saying. So I want you guys to know that. I want you guys to follow the money through the system. And I don't know what the answer is. I mean, there's nothing we can do at this point except sit back, pray, and watch, and hope that the Republicans go, hey, you know what? You might still be our candidate, still might be our guy, but you're overreaching. And unfortunately, I think we're probably going to get 6 to 8 months into his term before they finally start growing some hair on their balls. So I just wanted to start with that because obliterated. Thank you. I appreciate that, Dr. Liz. Obliterated. I just wanted to start with that because I have to get that out before I transition into oil subsidies, which I've spoken about before on a Finance is the Other Effort show many, many moons ago. And I can tell you they haven't much changed. Despite different pieces of legislation that have been put out by the Biden-Harris administration and by Bernie Sanders and the other lady senator with the long black hair, not Costa, not AOC, the other one. Anyway, the point is that we're going to get to that. So I'm playing mostly hair metal today, even though I know I started with Anthrax and Public Enemy because it makes me happy. And right now, I just need to grasp anything happiness that I have. So here is Cinderella Shelter Me, and I'm going to catch up on chat. Probably one of the Cinderella songs that sound the closest to an Aerosmith song, and I had completely forgotten about it. And then the other day it came on, and I was like, oh, shit, yeah, I forgot about that song. So this is a series on subsidies. So we know that part of the first week of the Trump administration, one of the things that he did was he did away with DEI for the sake of cost-cutting measures. But I had told you then, and I'm going to put it in context now, that DEI, if you're just talking about it from a financial standpoint, really doesn't do a whole bunch of anything to cut it from a cost-cutting measure. So what I proposed then and what I'm still proposing now is that was more of a social statement than that was an actual cost-cutting measure. So let's get into the numbers of it, all right? So DEI spending averaged about $250 million a year, all right? So that's nothing to sneeze at. However, $250 million a year represents 0.00084 of our total GDP for that same time frame. So fraction of a percent. Let me repeat that. $250 million a year on DEI, okay? And that represented 0.00084% of our total GDP. Now, I'm all about cost-cutting measures, absolutely. However, let's talk about where they can really start cutting money. If you really, we know that on, like I just got done telling you before we went into the song, that Trump signed the executive order on Monday to cut off federal funding to free lunches for kids and the SNAP program and Meals on Wheels and services for the elderly and the veterans and the underprivileged children. But let's assume, right, that that's not even what we're talking about. All right, for the sake of cost cutting, we're going to be looking at subsidies. Okay, so this is an oil subsidy show. Then I'm going to do a farming subsidy show. And then I'm going to do a military subsidy show. Now, maybe we'll find that there's not a lot of farming subsidies. Awesome. Maybe I'll find that there's not a lot of military subsidies. Awesome. Great. Like, do you know how fucking delighted I would be? Like, if I went to research oil subsidies and there was none, I would fucking have backflipped. I would have been like, fuck yeah, like we're getting it right. Hell yeah. But of course, as you and I both know, that is not the case. But if you're looking at an administration who is so concerned with cutting costs, let's get to where big money is actually being spent. So I want you to keep in mind that 0.00084% of GDP for DEI. How you feel about DEI, I don't care. Okay, I'm talking to you about the numbers. While we get into the numbers of the oil subsidies, so as of and I also want to preface this with there has been oil subsidies under every administration, right? Democrat, Republican. Now you have like with the, I'll talk about it here. It's in my notes buried somewhere that the Biden and Harris administration did a couple changes to it, but they didn't cut the subsidies to the oil industries either. Okay. So it's not like when a Republican president gets in, all of a sudden there's just oil subsidies. And then soon as they leave office and a Democrat gets in, there's no more oil subsidies. No. It doesn't work like that. The oil subsidies continue on and on. Now, I do understand that energy is important to us as a country. I get that part, all right? But we're talking about companies that make billions of dollars in net profit. Now, if the government came in and subsidized my business, I think I'd be raking it in too. Okay, so let's start getting into this. But I just want you to understand this is Democrats and Republicans. They might increase some things, they might decrease some things, but the point is that this has been over time. And on the first day that Trump got back into office, he signed an executive order that declared a national energy emergency. Now, by declaring that, just like he declared the national, whatever at the border, whatever, I can't remember what the actual phrasing is, where now we have military troops at the border. And we're not going to talk about that today. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about oil subsidies. But when you declare a national state of emergency for anything, it allows you to get permits faster. It allows you to get access to money that was currently locked up before. Again, as a reminder, this is why you see after a national disaster, they say, blah, blah, president declared a state of emergency. Well, they're doing that because they're trying to get access to go to those funds. And on a super side note, the federal funding freeze that was then overturned temporarily by a court as it's working its way through the system also affected those who are still reeling from national disasters, whether it's fire or hurricanes. It also cut off support for them too. Okay, so just keep this in mind. Just keep this in mind. So for through as of now, there are still oil subsidies that are received by the oil industry. All right. And we're going to go through each of them, but I just want to give you kind of a quick overview. So there's intangible drilling cost deductions. There's percentage depletion allowance, which is kind of like depreciation if you get a computer and you have your own company, then you can depreciate that asset. Kind of the same thing, but way more beneficial than what us mere mortals get. Domestic manufacturing deductions and research and development funding. All right. Now, with the emphasis of the Trump administration of drill, baby, drill, I would expect, just based on what we've seen so far, that there will be increase in subsidies that will be going to the oil industry. Now, how that is going to work with Elon Musk being his bro right now, I don't really know. But if I had to guess, I would assume that we will gladly put out more money into the oil industries. They also receive favorable leasing terms on federal land. We're going to get into that. International financing support. So they have the U.S. committed to over $1.8 billion to projects through the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation and the U.S. Export-Import Bank. So basically, they have access to funding that typically people are not going to have access to, businesses are not going to have access to. Now, because of a lot of things, so like for me, okay, if I have a client who really needs some heavy duty tax write-offs, we will look at speculative drilling. And one of the reasons why we look at speculative drilling is because so much of it can be used as a write-off. So even if it fails, not super bad in that context, because it does help the person with write-offs if they feel that if their tax bracket is too high. All right. Now, I can't tell you exactly what each company, and believe me, I fucking tried. I tried to go to the companies to figure out exactly how much they were getting in subsidies from the United States government. And A, their tax returns are very complicated. B, I'm not a CPA. Okay. So for me to come on and tell you I checked Exxon and they, blah, 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 I can't do that. Right. That's just not something I can do. So I had to find research on just overall information. So according to the Environmental and Energy Study Institute on Research and Development, in 2022, federal spending for R&D, natural gas and petroleum liquids was $121 million a year. Okay, so DEI, $250 million a year, research and development, $121 million a year. All right. In the fiscal year of 2022, the U.S. federal government provided tax expenditures totaling approximately $3 billion to the fossil fuel industry. Now we're way over DEI. We're talking like a fuck tons of DEIs in order to even get to that number. So $3 billion. So we got $3 billion plus $121 million. Okay, let's keep going. Then there's implicit subsidies. I'm going to break all these down after the next song, which accounting for externalities such as environmental degradation, which, I'm a tree hugger, I'm not going to lie, and health impacts of drudging and digging oil. And if they abandon the mines, we're going to talk about that too, because they don't have to put up the bond that a normal industry would do to be able to help repair the land after they drill, if they drill and abandon, or if they drill and they don't find enough oil, or they only find some oil. And let me finish this thought, and then I'm going to come back to that. So for that, in 2022, implicit subsidies was $754 billion. So $754 billion plus $3 billion plus $121 million. You can still cancel DEI, but you can also start attacking this. If you're looking at a budget and you take all the bullshit away, I don't care how you fucking feel about Trump. I don't care if you love him, if you hate him, I don't really give a fuck. But if you're saying, Mel, here's a budget and we need to drastically cut, which we do, we need to drastically cut spending. Why would somebody go to one of the smallest programs instead of one of the largest subsidies? And I haven't even researched farming subsidies yet. I haven't researched military subsidies yet. And I hope that when I come back on that show, I'm like, I tried to find something. There's nothing there. Woohoo, high five and a million angels, like go us. But there is. Do you see what I'm trying to tell you? Right? So now let's just finish it off with this, and then I'm going to go to a song and catch up on chat. Net profits for major oil companies in 2024, and I just pulled a couple. According to the Associated Press, ExxonMobil reported a net income. Now, net means just that. So this is how you tell the difference between gross and net. If there's a whole bunch of leaves in a pond, that's gross, right? If you take a net and you skim the top of it, you're going to be able to get maybe a fraction of those leaves. You've thus netted it. That's how you can remember the difference between gross and net. So when we're talking about net profits, we're talking about after everything has been paid. Everything has been paid, okay? ExxonMobil, net income, $8.6 billion in the third quarter of 2024. Okay? Now remember, and I want to point out, that's under the Biden administration. Okay? Now, Chevron recorded a net income of $4.5 billion in third quarter of 2024. And Marathon Oil reported a net income of $287 million in third quarter of 2024. So this is why I have a problem with subsidies for these companies that are earning, because when we start getting into how the subsidies work and how it gives them an advantage, we find that if the government stopped giving subsidies to the oil and gas industries, our gas would be extremely expensive, which, as much as I hate to say it, and I'd hate even more to pay it, is what the fair market value would be. So, to keep that in context, the reason why Republicans and Democrats haven't done that, because gas will go up. And even though I've told you, OPEC and OPEC Plus are the main contributors of the oil because they're sitting on a fuck ton supply of oil and it's very close to the ground, it's easy to get up and out. Okay? Where I don't know about oil drilling as far as geography locations in the United States, but we're not sitting on as much, and it's not as close to the ground, to the surface, as it is with the OPEC and specifically OPEC countries, not so much the OPEC plus countries. And no administration wants to be the one where gas goes to $7 or $8 a gallon. However, if you take away the subsidies, you would help cut the costs in our budget drastically. But what would happen is that we would also feel the pinch there. Right? So we're talking about, imagine a recession with $8 to $9 a gallon of gas. So I think that it would be pie in the sky, and it would be foolish of me to think that all the subsidies should be cut off. Right? Because you have to balance the timing in the market. What is not the market, the economy? What is the Fed doing? Are they raising interest rates? Are they lowering interest rates? And the thing is that you have to weigh all of that together. However, if we're truly cutting costs, I'm going to argue, and you're going to see as I continue to go through and break down the different subsidies that the oil companies get, that there is much more efficient ways to do it. And if you're really trying to do that, there's other things you can focus on. So I haven't heard this song in a long time. And I know it's a little piece of trivia on this. So everybody knows like MTV Live or whatever with the Carson Daly. What the fuck was it called? I had stopped watching MTV by then. But anyway, before that, it was called Dial MTV. Do you guys remember that? And it had a picture of a phone, like the old school phone, and you would call and request songs. Now, whether it was the record company pushing it or it was the fans, Home Sweet Home by Motley Crue, TRL, thank you, She Owl, TRL and beyond. Yes, thank you for saving me, TRL. So True Request Live. Before True Request Live was the thing, it was Dial MTV. And Home Sweet Home by Motley Crue, which is a song I'm about to play, had to be retired because it kept coming in number one so much that they had to retire the song. And they just said, we're retiring it. We're no longer going to be playing that. And then, of course, Dial MTV birthed TRL. So here is Home Sweet Home. Now, one other thing about this. This is the original version. On the Greatest Hits album, which I have, at the very beginning and towards the end, Tommy Lee's keyboard part, he changes slightly by like a couple notes, and it's just enough for a diehard fan to hear the difference, and it bothers me. So this is the original Home Sweet Home of Vince Neil with the fucking pink underwear on and like the zebra print Spanx, with the chaps, if you guys remember it. And here it is. So enjoy. Oh my God, I watched that video so much. Well, you didn't have a choice, right? I mean, fucking MTV played that song religiously, and I was here for the whole thing. All right, so She Owl. Ooh, my headset is way up. Hold on. I was singing my little girl heart out right there, and I had to keep checking to make sure it was on music only, so I wasn't singing over you guys' experience. Oh, Justin Timberlake. Oh, no. I was thinking, okay, so who's JT? Jethro Tull. Okay, all right, thank you. Well, I mean, Jethro Tull, he did beat out Metallica for heavy metal, right? So, I mean, I'm sure he's a great musician. I just think that kind of tarnished him for a lot of people. But I love Home Sweet Home, so I normally don't play ballads on my show, but I thought, what the fuck? It makes me happy, and right now, grasping onto any type of happiness you can, I think is truly important. Now, She Owl brought up a great point, and I do not have the number for used. She said, curious, what's the breakdown and percentage for those categories you mentioned in comparison to the 0.00084%? And yes, that would have been a great idea. I did not do that. I did not figure that out because I just was like, okay, it's going to be well over 0.00084%. So I didn't want to bother doing the math because it's not one of my favorite things in the whole world. So yes, yeah, I think that's great. And maybe next show I'll do it. Probably won't, but let's just assume it's obviously going to be considerably higher than 0.00084. But great point. That would have been wonderful to keep it in context, and I missed an opportunity to keep it in context. Totally on my fault. Okay, so. There we go. I'm like, all of a sudden everything froze and my notes didn't move. I'm like, well, this is going to make a very short show. All right. So we are going to talk about subsidies for oil companies, and we're going to start with research and development. All right. So the U.S. government allocates funds to support R&D for fossil fuels, projects related to enhanced oil recovery, which I'm assuming would be getting more oil out of the ground, carbon capture, utilization, and storage, which I do as a tree hugger. I appreciate that. Exploration and development of unconventional oil and gas resources. So this is your shale. This is your fracking. This is your, what is the actual... it's called, it has a name. It's like not rock oil, but basically when you're talking about fracking, you're talking about oil that's trapped in rocks. And what they do is they take and they pump high powered water into it, and then they break open these rocks to be able to get access to the oil that's in them. But of course, from fracking, we see I think it was Michigan, where their water, you could light their tap water on fire because of all the fracking that was going on around them. So other resources like shale gas, advanced drilling and extraction techniques. All right. So let's see. Let me go down. I don't want to talk about that because that's going to get into ticker symbols. I don't even know why I researched that. So they can take now let me put this in context. With companies, you can write off some wages, right? You can use it as a business expense. You can also do this with oil companies, but in a tax credit form. And this is also write-offs for equipment and materials, but they have a different type of depreciation that a normal standard business will not have. Remember, I gave you the example of the laptop versus, a speculative oil drill, where you can have upwards to 75%, for clients specifically, you can have up to 75% of the tax write-offs, basically, for being involved in speculative oil drilling. So, let's see. And now my notes got all kind of fucked up. So let me figure out where I am. Research and development. And so at some point, my notes all became jarbled, and I'm not really sure what happened. So let's go back. Do I have, this is the R&D. Okay, so my R&D notes are all fucked up. So let's jump, let me jump to a different subsidy. So let's talk about I guess technically this would fall under R&D, which is probably why it's here on my notes in this exact allocation, would be the deduction for development costs. So this would be costs related to exploring and developing oil and gas resources, including technology advancements, and they're all eligible for deductions. Government programs, such as those from the Department of Energy, which offers grants to oil companies and research institutions for projects that will improve the efficiency and the safety in fossil fuel extraction. Again, okay, I'm down for that. Reduce greenhouse gas emissions from oil and gas production. Also, tree hugger like that, develop alternative uses for oil and gas byproducts. And so this comes out of the Department of Energy. Now, the administration has alluded to upcoming changes in the Department of Energy and maybe making them stronger. So we will see how all of that changes. Now, let me go. I'm going to jump over the research and development because my notes are really fucked up and I'm having a hard time keeping my train of thought. So let's talk about favorable leasing agreements. Now, this is, even though this doesn't seem like a subsidy from the government, it is absolutely a subsidy from the government. So when they go, oil industry, and they go to try to find gas, a lot of times they're doing it on federal land. Now, they have to lease that land from the federal government. Now, if you or I wanted to lease the land to do XYZ, what would happen is that we would pay considerably higher dollars per acre than the oil and gas companies will do. And so they are given favorable leasing rates and on public property. So let's talk about the difference between the Biden and the Trump administration, just staying on this thing. They have not before they had non-competitive leasing, basically where if nobody else wanted the land, then they could come in and they wouldn't have to, they wouldn't be compared to anything. They'd be able to lease the land at sometimes $1.50 per acre for the first 5 years. $1.50 per acre for the first 5 years to lease land. So when we're talking about undervalued preferential leasing amounts, we're talking about $1.50 per acre. Now, I believe it is somewhere, yes, here it is, I found it. And according to the Inflation Reduction Act, this is under the Biden administration, they increased the minimum bid that it needs to be $10 per acre. Okay? So even then, this is what I'm saying, regardless of the administration, the oil and gas companies have been sucking at the teat of the federal governments for so fucking long. It's ridiculous. Now, do I think that Trump will lower it back down to the $1.50 to $2 per acre favorable leasing rates that he gives the oil and gas industry? 100%, absolutely. But as part of the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act, it was increased to $10. Now, when they pull the oil out of the ground, they have to pay royalties to whoever the land is owned by. All right. Now, that also gets preferential treatment. So on private land, it is 20 to 25%. So whatever you pull out of the ground in oil, if I own a swath of land and you come and drill oil on it, any oil that you pull out of that ground, you will pay me on private land at 20 to 25% for the oil production in royalties. However, if you're doing it on federal lands, you will pay 12.5% for onshore production. Now, you might ask, Mel, how's that a subsidy? Well, because all of these things are subsidizing their cost of doing business, which is increasing their bottom line, which is increasing their net profits. Do you feel what I'm saying? If you did this for any industry, like if homelessness became as big a concern as pulling oil out of the ground and they got this kind of subsidies thrown at them, we wouldn't have a fucking homeless person anywhere. Do you guys feel what I'm saying? So these are the ways that the federal government, where it might not look like they're giving outright money, where if you have a Meals on Wheels program or free SNAP, okay, SNAP. If you have that program where you can go, okay, the federal government gave blah, right? That's more apparent than, okay, well, we're not going to charge you the normal rate on royalties. We're going to charge it to you at 12.5 versus 20 to 25%, which is what you'd pay on private land. And in order to lease, we're only going to charge you, depending on the administration that's in office, either $1.50 to $2 to $10 per acre for the first 5 years. That's a subsidy. That's basically what Bernie Sanders calls welfare for billionaires, right? And so this is what we're dealing with. And, there's more. Let me play a song. I just saw that we reached the hour already. And, I try to keep everything to an hour. Let me play a song to get us through this. And I'm going to go through and try to start wading through my notes because I don't want to bore you guys and have you check out. So here's Rat, You're in Trouble. Looking at all the wonderful gifts that you guys are putting up of Rat and Motley Crue. My God. They all look like women and they were so fine. Yes, they were. Yes, they were. Okay, so thank you for that, X. I appreciate that. Sorry that I didn't see you there. Okay, so we were talking about oil subsidies in the economic stance of where money could actively be cut from. So one of the things is that if you go and you drill something, you have to put up a bond, which means that basically, am I on talk? Okay, cool. I'm going to get all the way in this and then nobody's gonna be able to fucking hear me. Is you have to put up a bond, basically saying, okay, we're going to do probably irreversible damage to the environment as we're drilling, and we're going to put up a bond in order for you to be able to, if we don't pay to actually fix the oil drill or we abandon it, then you're going to be able to take this bond and you're going to be able to pay for it. However, most bonds that the oil companies put up are only $10,000. When costs typically exceed $100,000 per well. Okay, so they don't even have to put up enough money to be like, hey, if I fuck up the environment and don't clean it up right, we're still fucked, which means that who is cleaning it up then? The federal government. So the federal government is on the hook for that. Now, there has been wells that have been abandoned. So the thing is that this is not like a, but if they do this. No, this is like being done. And why the fuck would they not abandon the well and not clean it up? Take my $10,000. Here's $200,000 to clean up the mess that I fucking made. And the federal government's going to pay it. And they're going to continue to pay subsidies out to the oil companies. Not to mention, in the royalties, I forgot to mention this because I got confused in my notes. I have like this very specific system that I use to organize my notes, and the format got all fucked up. So now I can't tell where my breaks are between like points. So that's why I was like, okay, let me play a song because I'm not reading my notes correctly. That a lot of times with the royalties, the 12.5% royalties that they do pay versus the private land, which they would be paying 20 to 25%, they are deferred for years. So the thing is that the federal government, 12.5% is what they get charged. But then often in the contracts, it says that the royalties are actually deferred. So they're not paying those either. And when I talk about this stuff, I just want you guys to picture how this falls down to their bottom line, how this keeps trickling down to their bottom line, and how this just means more and more profit for them. Now, do you think that if the subsidies were cut off from the United States, that these oil companies would not hesitate to charge 8 to 9 gallons of gas like that immediately, right? Even though they're sitting on net profit after net profit after net profit, and they're sitting on all of this fucking money. So the thing is that we pay into the federal government, and our tax dollars are going to these subsidies that are going to the oil companies. Now, implicit subsidies, this is another one, and this also, the format's all fucked up for me. So obviously fossil fuel emits greenhouse gases, okay? And it can cause, we've talked about all the stuff, extreme weather, sea levels rising, like all kinds of natural disasters. And the social cost of carbon just in general, making our planet hotter. I read something today where the ocean had gotten 4 degrees hotter than they thought. And I was just like, I can't read this morning. It's going to fuck me up. And I woke up in the middle of the night last night, worried about this show, worried about the oil subsidies, and worried about the loss of environment. And I'm just like, Jesus Christ, I need like a heavy fucking horse sedative or something, because I'm just not going to be able to sleep. And also the health impacts. that this has on everybody around it. Like when I talked to you about with the fracking and with Michigan being able to light their tap water on fire and them having to switch to bottled water and the fact to actually clean that up. Those are all environmental and health impact costs that can't be tracked. And remember, I always use that example of the bridge. Of you see the bridge being built, but what you don't see is all the other things that could have been funded if you didn't build that unnecessary bridge. This is the same thing. These are all the invisible costs that come through an economy and a citizenship like ours in the United States that you cannot quantify. You can speculate, you can try to guess by taking the cases that have been reported and go, okay, well, if they're around this area that was fracking, then we can assume that this illness or cancer came from probably this, disgusting water or definitely did not aid it, right? Blah, blah, blah. But you can't really track that. That is just kind of like, we'll give you a freebie, right? Public infrastructure damage. This is all the stuff that's caused by the extreme weather conditions that emitting the CO2 gas does. So if you have, like in North Carolina, they had the hurricane come through and just so much rain, it washed out an entire town. My friend who lives in Tennessee, it washed out a bridge that she crosses over every single day, completely washed it out. All of these things are, again, impacts that we can't track, that we can't quantify. We can track them. We can go, hey, looks like the environment is getting shittier, but we can't quantify them. See, that's the problem. Just like when I told you with sending troops to the border and the fentanyl and the sex trafficking or the human trafficking that's coming over the border. Well, if you are not looking at the Canadian border, therefore you're not putting money towards it, therefore you're not pulling data on it, you have no idea in comparison of how much human trafficking and fentanyl might be coming over from the Canadian border, just as the Canadian border could say, hey, there's fentanyl and human trafficking coming over from the United States to Canada, and they'd all be correct. But if you don't have the money to collect the data, then just because you have absence of data doesn't mean that what you think is correct. And we're going to find that out a lot with stop and frisk, which Trump has reinitiated. And I did a show on stop and frisk years ago, and I'm going to do that one as well. Because when we're talking about numbers, we're talking about, are they in context? So these are things you cannot quantify, okay? You know they're there, but you can't fucking quantify them. So basically they get a pass, all right? And military protection of energy supply chains. But I mean, that one, I'm like, okay, yes, I understand, but we do have to protect our energy sources. So, I mean, okay, so we spend extra money for the military to protect our energy supply chains. Yes, now, so implicit subsidies are very problematic because of what they do to the price of oil. For a variety of different reasons. It does not, when we fill up our tank, like we might be pissed if it's $4.50 or, if it's $3.75, whatever, depending on what type of gas you get. But if you truly took in all of the costs to our health as a nation, our economy, the environmental impact globally, which whether we like it or not, we're all on the same fucking planet. So if this country's polluting, it's coming to us. It's not going to stay in one place. There's not a dome around this specific country. What we have is we have gas that is not priced fairly. And now we're in this catch-22 where we've been subsidizing the oil companies for so long that, knowing even though they've been getting blockbuster net profits, knowing that if the subsidies were pulled, they would not give a fuck about you and I getting gas, and they would immediately raise it to $8 or $9 a gallon. On top of that, you have an economic cycle with increased tariffs coming that could actually exacerbate the problem for people who do need to commute to work or whatever the case is. Now, you can argue rightfully so, if we truly made gas per gallon exactly how much it should actually cost, that would deter maybe some people to get on public transportation. Washington State had fantastic public transportation. Vegas, none. It's like shit. It is super shit. I looked at trying to take it. It's awful. It's fucking awful. So the argument from environmentalist groups is that because you're giving these subsidies, both seen and unseen, that you are limiting the push for renewable energies and putting money towards that, and you are sticking with the same old, same old. So if you're the Trump administration and you're taking a sledgehammer to everything in the name of cutting costs, then why don't you fucking start to one of the places where you can start undoing years and years and years and years of damage and basically suckling at the teat of the federal government. There's also carbon pricing in there. And let me see. And I skipped through a lot of my notes. And so I'm going to wrap it up there. I had one more song, but I'm going to stop there. And I had one more song to play, which was Coconut Grove by David Lee Roth, which I've played before. And I love that song so much. I'm just checking chat here. Okay. All right. So it doesn't look like we have anything going on in chat. So that's just a rough breakdown. But when we're talking about $250 million a year versus $754 billion and $300 billion, I'm sorry, $3 billion and $754 billion and $121 million in subsidies to the oil and gas industry, the DEI policies at $250 million a year annually just don't seem that as important. Now, yes, you can argue that, well, I don't know if you can argue, but people argue that, DEI made it so the right candidate wasn't getting the job. But there's a reason why DEI was implemented. And I would argue that from the time it was implemented, things really haven't changed for the people that DEI was implemented to try to protect. You guys feel what I'm saying? So we're going to keep exploring subsidies as much as I can. Now, at any given time, the numbers I provide you can change like that, right? New taxes can come out, new estimations can come out, new reportings. Things are going to change with the administration constantly. So when I give you guys the numbers, I try to keep them in context to the year that I'm explaining it. So the data I gave you as far as the subsidies was from the year 2022, right? But they haven't been much changed besides the small changes I told you over the Biden administration, versus the net profits that I gave you from 2024, because those were readily accessible. So I try to keep the dates and the type of things in context as much as possible so that I can at least do the best I can to give you an apples to apples comparison. And, you know, whether you like Trump or vote for Trump or don't vote for Trump is really not what I'm concerned about. I just don't want the federal government to keep lying and saying that something is that isn't, when the numbers are there if we just try to dig them out. So number one benefactor of DEI is a white woman. So yeah. So with that, I will be back. Everybody's got jokes now. So, I will be back next week and I will be talking about farming subsidies, because there's been a lot of talk about we're paying people not to grow crops, or was that at a certain time? Are we still doing that? How are they getting subsidized? Are they getting enough, quite frankly? Is the farming community getting, and I would argue with you that food is more important than our oil. Are they getting the same subsidies? Are they getting less? What are they getting them for? How are they helping? Is there alternatives? That's going to be what I'm going to try to focus on the next show as I just continue to find these sectors. And I'll be honest with you guys, I'm nervous about this, because what you don't talk ill about is you don't talk ill about farmers and you don't talk ill about military, right? And that's not an anti-military thing. That's just a thing. Like any politician, you know, we love our farmers. We support our farmers. We support our vets. We support our military. Okay, but is there wasteful spending in there? Yes. And so we're going to talk about that. And I don't necessarily know how people are going to feel about that, but I would rather know than not know. And I hope you guys feel the same. So with that, finance is the other F word, and station head, I will be back next Wednesday where we will be covering farming subsidies, assuming no crazy shit happened between here and there. That becomes more important. Thank you, Dream. I appreciate that. I love seeing all you guys' faces, and I appreciate you coming out. So with that, station head and finance is the other F word. I am out. This bitch. You're welcome, SoCal.
Thanks for listening. Please like, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.